Welcome to the Startup to Exit podcast, where we will bring you world-class entrepreneurs and VCs to share their hard-earned success stories and secrets. This podcast has been brought to you by TIE Seattle. TIE is a global nonprofit that focuses on fostering entrepreneurship. TIE Seattle offers a range of programs, including the Go Vertical Startup Creation Weekend, TIE Entrepreneur Institute, and the TIE Seattle Angel Network. We encourage you to become a TIE member so you can gain access to these great programs. To become a member, please visit www.seattle.tie.org.
My name is Gowri Shankar. I'm a member of the board of TIE Seattle. I, along with Shirish Nadkarni, are hosting this podcast, Startup to Exit. This is our episode number 3. I've known Shirish for a long time, and we have an exciting guest today that Shirish will introduce shortly. Shirish is a serial entrepreneur and soon to become a serial author. He's on his second book, Winner Takes All, and it's out wherever books are sold. Shirish, hope you keep writing more books. Over to you.
Thank you, Gowri. Hello, everyone. My name is Shirish Nadkarni. I'm a serial entrepreneur, author, and board member of TIE Seattle. We are very pleased to welcome Raj Kapoor to our podcast today. Raj is a co-founder and managing director at Climactic, a venture capital fund focused on climate tech. He was also a strategic advisor at Lyft, former CEO, co-founder of Snapfish and Fitmob, now known as ClassPass, and a former managing director at Mayfield Fund. I got to know Raj when he was a VC at Mayfield Fund and was very impressed with his personal story, which is why we invited him today. So welcome, Raj.
Thank you.
Great. So Raj, let's start with your early life. Where did you grow up and where did you go to school?
Sure. I grew up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Parents both came from India, so first generation American. Bethlehem's a small town in Pennsylvania. We were, I think, the first Indian family, even featured on the front page of a newspaper with my mom wearing a sari and a tiger rug from an uncle that I think used to hunt tigers. And so it was very different growing up there. And went to public school, a school called Freedom High School. Our rival was called Liberty High School, so Freedom versus Liberty. And ended up going to Carnegie Mellon in state for my undergraduate, and then my career in business school after that.
That's great. So you started Snapfish during the dot-com boom, but then the bust happened right after that. What was the opportunity that you saw with Snapfish, and how did you navigate your way through the dot-com bust?
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to be, a lot of, I think, successes around luck and timing. And then there's some experience and skill applied to it and hard work. But from my perspective, I was lucky to be going into business school from 1994 to 96 when the internet was just coming out, like where the commercial internet was born, the browser, Netscape was born. I started this internet club with someone else at Harvard Business School and got very involved in this new world of interactive network media. And prior to business school, I'd worked at a telecom company that was early on playing around with that whole area around ISDN and ADSL and trying to figure out content. And so when the protocols came out and it was much more open and browsers, I just saw a ton of opportunity. Ended up joining a startup called At Home, which was a consortium of cable companies to launch broadband services around the country because everything was dial-up before then. And while I was there, I looked at lots of different application categories. I kind of knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur coming out to Silicon Valley in 1996. And I really love music. I'm in a band, I DJ, but I didn't see a business opportunity there because of the rights issues. And also at the time, the bandwidth wasn't high enough. The second thing I looked at, was around TV and film. Again, rights issues there, felt like it would take a long time and difficult. And so that left another media type, which was photography. And looked at that. I had three other co-founders that were Indian. So we were looking at various businesses together. And the four of us decided that this is a really interesting space, which is photography, because we saw the transition from film to digital. We saw that photos are owned by the person, so there wasn't a rights issue that's there. And there was a virality to it, because even back in those days in 1999, we knew that customer acquisition would be a challenge. How do you acquire customers? And so the idea that we had, it was borrowing a little bit from someone I had met and learned from, which is Bill Gross, who started Idea Lab. He had the audacious idea to start a company that gave away a PC for free PC, as long as you look at the ads.
Yeah.
And I studied the model, and I don't think anyone was quite sure whether it would work. But I thought, well, if he can give away a PC, why can't I give film developing? And then what you do is you get the person, when they're a film user, they're uploading, we're digitizing their images and putting them online. They want that repository. They'll share it through email. And back then, AOL was they had You've Got Pictures as well, but it was a very clunky service. And they'll hopefully purchase products. So it could be gifts, could be prints. And in addition to that, each time they're viewing photos, we can show them very personalized ads, because we'll ask them questions up front. And so that was the plan, to give away free film developing. And then once you get a digital camera, this is your place now. You're going to put your digital photos there too, and you're going to process them and print them if you want, and do whatever you want to do it. So it was a photo commerce site. And most good ideas are not unique, and probably 100 other startups were there in the same 6-month period that we had to compete with. There was the most notable competitors were Shutterfly and OPhoto, and then we were Snapfish. And so that was the beginning of Snapfish. I was introduced to Mayfield, to Yogan Dalal. And here are 4 bright young Indian founders coming in and pitching him. And he liked the idea. And another friend from business school, Brad Garlinghouse, who now is running Ripple, but he was at a VC firm called CMGI. And they both syndicated the deal. And just on a PowerPoint, we were able to raise $7.5 million in 1999, which was wonderful. And then we proceeded to launch, and found that the idea didn't really work. People were nervous about giving us their film because it was through mail. It would also take a while versus instant film developing, where 1 hour photo, and the difference was that they don't have a copy of it. They're giving the film. If we lose it, their memories are gone forever, and they're so valuable. And so that was a big learning. And we had to reconstitute the company. But before we learned that, we were told the best time to raise your next round, and this was at the height of the dot-com boom, is before you launch and have metrics. So we were able to raise another, I think it was like another $36 million before launching.
That's crazy.
Back in those days. Those were crazy days. After we raised the money and launched, realized it didn't work, then we had to pivot. And then the short story there is, in 2001, the dot-com boom busted. Financing was difficult. It was also very expensive to start companies like this. You had to buy like a $7 million EMC storage server. You had to host your own website, etc. And of course, you had to pay for customer acquisition, which was increasingly, even though it was viral, it wasn't enough growth. And so as things really started to implode, we decided to sell the company and hired a banker. Banker didn't do much, didn't find any buyers. I had to go back to our partner who said he's a film processing company, a private company, District Photo. And they said, well, if you don't find any buyers, maybe we're interested. And so I called him and said, guess what? We don't have any buyers. And I either have to shut down the business or we sell it to you. And so he bought it for like 10 cents on the dollar invested. So I had to go back to all my friends and family and the VCs and hand back not very much money. We took the company because we had hired a head of growth, which was a mistake. So we had to take the company from 200 people down to 25 people. We moved to windowless offices in San Francisco in a not so great part of the neighborhood. And then after we had become a small subsidiary of District Photo, we reoriented the business around digital cameras and they started to take off. And people needed something to do with their digital film. They wanted physical prints or other items. They wanted to easily share them, especially if there's a lot of photos. Emailing 100 photos didn't make sense. So we pivoted to digital and the business really started to take off. Another interesting point was that as that happened, the retail industry woke up. And within 1 year, most of the prints that were created out of digital cameras all of a sudden ended up at retail so fast. And that was a huge threat. So I thought, if you can't beat them, join them. So we created a white label version of Snapfish. And they had all tried using Kodak or Fuji's websites, which were really crappy. And so they were open to going to a company that had a lot of users like we did, and that was really understood user experience. And so we were able to, and I had aimed low and told my partners that let's see if we can get some small retailers to start. We ended up closing Costco, Walgreens, and Walmart within a year. And they were the major leaders of film developing. And so we launched all of their stores, online services, white label. Company became profitable. We launched also internationally into the UK. And then an interesting thing happened where, I was basically an employee of this private company, but he had created a bonus program, almost like a stock option, but really not because it was a separate company. And I thought, he's never going to sell. He's just happy keeping as it is. And I was surfing one day with some friends, and this is why, being in the Bay Area is an advantage sometimes, because I didn't know I was going to go surfing with a banker who was representing HP trying to buy online photo companies. And she talked to me in the water, and she was like, "Well, you're not for sale." And I was like, No. I think, let me find out. I think we could be for sale for the right price. And that ended up, ultimately, I didn't hire a banker. I did the deal myself, and we ended up selling for $300 million to HP, in addition to a long-term contract to our parent company for mail order processing and gifts and all that stuff. So turned out to be a great win, and that's when I ended up leaving and joining Mayfield.
What a great story.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So you were at Mayfield for a number of years, and then you left again to start your second company, Fitmob. So what was the inspiration for Fitmob, and why did you leave Mayfield to start Fitmob?
Yeah, so, I enjoyed my time at Mayfield, but after about 7 years or so, I had the itch to go be an entrepreneur again. And part of it was what happened in 2007, 2008. I really got the climate bug, in the sense of I always like to have some purpose and goal outside of just making money to focus my life on. And I heard Al Gore and John Doerr from Kleiner Perkins on stage at TED and was convinced that this is the biggest problem humanity faces. There's lots of problems, but this one was big and really difficult, and I wanted to dedicate my time to it. So I first created a social game on Facebook on the side while I was working at Mayfield. Surprisingly, got $500,000 from the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, to launch this game, because it was an awareness game around climate. And I got a ex-Zynga product manager and a team. They built it. They launched it. It didn't really work. People played it, but they didn't take the offline actions that I was hoping. to build awareness. So then I talked to Mayfield about this, and we all looked at this clean tech bubble that was happening. And what we ended up doing was focusing Mayfield around what are the opportunities that are more capital light in the space around climate. And we looked at utilities, we looked at software, we looked at fintech. I looked at transportation and found this marketplace, found this company that had a marketplace for rides, which would make it more efficient. And I was very convinced that that was going to be an interesting thing. And it was called Zimride. And so I led the Series A, and that later became Lyft. I was spending a day a week at Lyft, and I was really excited about the operating side of it. And so I ended up talking to my partners and saying, look, I think I want to do something more hands-on. And the first thing I did was, so I left Mayfield and started something called Co-Founder Partners, which would co-found multiple companies, 3 maybe, and I work on each of them and have a real more hands-on approach, almost like an incubator. And then through that, I met someone, Tony Horton. He's a famous fitness instructor, and he has a program that is probably one of the most successful ones called P90X. And I did his program, and it changed my life. And at the time, my wife was also a medical weight management professional. She's a doctor. And I saw the obesity problem. I saw the lack of fitness. And I looked at the model and thought, wow, there's something broken here. People join gyms, and the gym doesn't really want you to come. They just want to take your money. And so I wanted to change the way fitness is there, and came up with a concept of a marketplace connecting high-quality trainers in the neighborhood to groups of people, mobs. We came up with Fitmob. Tony could be as involved because of competitive dynamic with his projects he was working on. So I ended up, rather than doing co-founder partners, one failure mode that I was told is that you'll just fall in love with one of your companies and go, and that's what happened. So I started Fitmob, which was that kind of marketplace. That too, initial idea didn't work, just like Snapfish. Had to pivot it. And there's a longer story there, but in short, we ended up a model that was more like Open Table for classes, which looked a lot like a company in New York that had started earlier, ClassPass. And we were going head to head. It was a very brutal battle. It didn't feel like Uber versus Lyft, that two companies could really succeed. And so I sat down with the CEO, another first generation Indian, Payal, and we talked about merging the two companies, which is what we did. And so we brought the two companies together. Their company was bigger. We just called it ClassPass. I joined the team for 6 months to do the transition, help launch internationally. And that company now merged with MindBody, which is the largest provider of fitness software in the world. And ClassPass is the market leader. So I'm hopeful that that combined entity, which is still private, can have a wonderful, successful future and exit sometime.
Great, Shirish. So now, one of the issues with starting a marketplace is a chicken or egg problem, as you know, right? So with Fitmob, or perhaps with ClassPass, how did you get started? You had to obviously get the gyms on board when you had no customers. So how did that process go for you?
Well, it was even more complex. What I had done was I wanted to remove the power of the gyms and just go to trainers and make the space fungible. Right. So you're just subscribing to a trainer, and you're not subscribing to a gym. Mm-hmm. And the workouts can happen outdoors. They can happen in spaces that would be rented in the neighborhood. And there were two big problems with that. One was that it's a three-way marketplace. I was expecting the trainer to find the space, but we had to find the space and match it with the trainer and match it with the customer. And that proved to be challenging. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, we needed a space requirement that if there's bad weather, it needs to be indoors. And so outside of California and Florida and the Sun Belt, it would be a challenge. and you need to be able to play music pretty loud early in the morning, and that's a challenge.
Mhm.
And I negotiated with the park system and got permits, but there were very strict rules around noise and music. And then finding spaces was also challenging. So that's why we ended up pivoting the model to really just help the existing studios, yoga studios, gyms, etc., fill up with a subscription rather than trying to create kind of a new entity in doing that. It proved to be too challenging.
Got it. But even convincing the yoga studios to join your platform must have been a challenge when you had really not many customers, I assume. So how do you
Yeah, and
get
that's
beyond that?
where something I learned from Lyft too, like they had a program early on called the Pioneer Program, and it's basically throwing capital at the problem. And they would acquire drivers and then give away a lot of rides through couponing
Mhm.
so that the drivers have enough critical mass to be on the system and then slowly bring the couponing off because people find value in the service, but they needed that
Right,
extra jolt to go try it. In
right.
our case, we tried giving a first month free and to go work out at all these amazing studios. And then we were subsidizing that first month
Mhm.
of visits. And that helped solve the problem because then we could call up a studio and say, we that are ready to use it. And it's not that they would sign up and no one would come.
Right, right. Excellent. All right. So let's take the conversation to your journey with Lyft, and I'll turn it over now to Gowri to carry the conversation forward.
Sure.
Great. Thanks, Shirish. Raj, what a fascinating journey you've been on. Just listening to you, lot of our listeners should be inspired. One thing that struck me was you never worried about pivoting.
Yeah.
Whether it was with your companies or with your funds or any of this, you just said this is not the right time and pivoted and didn't hang on to your oh, I got to do this kind of a thing, which founders get stuck in sometimes because it's how is this something you all along had, or was it one of those that you were forced into? What was the journey? I'll come to the lift part of it, but I found this part of your story very fascinating that you never worried about pivoting. You thought, it's what I got to do, and convinced everybody around you to do it. Is that something you did naturally, or is something you learned?
Well, I would say pivoting is always hard.
Yep.
It was difficult to make the decision each time.
Hmm.
But there are, I think, two things that allowed me to do it with more ease.
Hmm.
One is coming from an engineering background where you're looking for truth. And it's like, and with the beauty of starting an internet business is that you get data
Hmm.
and there's still a lot of judgment that's necessary, but I was looking at more like there's a truth here somewhere, we just have to solve it.
Hmm.
And we have to apply the data to it versus I have this grand idea and I am going to do that. And that gets to the second point, which is that I think there is a surrendering of ego.
Hmm.
So, for example, when I was pivoting Fitmob into what looked like ClassPass, and then I'm realizing that it's better to merge the company with our fiercest competitor. One of my advisors, who's also our legal counsel, is an amazing guy, Ted Wang. And he was the advisor and counsel to Dropbox, Facebook, and others. And he pulled me aside and he said, the only way this is going to happen is when you meet Pyle live, face to face, you need to let go of your ego and tell her that you copied her. And only then can this like tension dissolve that's there. And that's in fact what I did. And the tension dissolves. And it became more like, okay, how do we make this work versus two people kind of butting heads in doing it. So I think
And
ego dissolution is an important element too, because it's not about you have a hypothesis but it's not like you've figured it all out.
Yeah, and I think this the word you use, ego disillusionment, because to be an entrepreneur, you got to have that, bravado, confidence, a little edge, and a lot of ego to get to that point, right? Then you got to look inside and say, hey, this is the right time to do this, and have the same confidence to let it go because you saw the larger goal of the company and your idea surviving. Otherwise, the other option was it probably, sort of gets to its own destiny, but not at the rate at which, or even the scope at which you got there. I think that's part of it is a great learning for young entrepreneurs because they watch a ton of social media and everybody says you got to go, and really don't know when to really reflect. That seems like a great lesson. Share ego disillusionment. That's a word I think that phrase I'm going to remember going forward.
Yeah, it has spiritual background around
Uh-huh.
that that's what we are at our core, but
Uh-huh.
that gets a little bit deeper. But yeah, I think the other piece of it is that it's rarely works if you are pivoting the company to something totally different.
Mm-hmm.
But if people joined you, like in the case of Snapfish, they join because there's an emotional satisfaction people get about their photography. It creates
Mm-hmm.
beautiful memories.
Mm-hmm.
Our pivot was how we got to that end goal, but the end
Mm-hmm.
goal of, we call it bringing smiles to people, still existed.
Mm-hmm.
How to get there was changed. Same thing with
Mm-hmm.
FitMob. It was about fitness. It was about getting people to be more active. So,
Mm-hmm.
but how we got there changed. But the
Mm-hmm.
people that joined for that mission remained excited about it.
Yeah. Shirish and I are old enough to remember At Home. Then it became At
Yeah.
Home Excite because at that time in the early '90s, I was on that team that what became Sprint. It was cable companies came together and formed At Home for the internet,
Hmm.
and the version earlier than Sprint for the wireless. It was interesting to watch both of those. And then the early days of Netscape when CDs used to come out, Excite used to send those out, and the browsers. It's an era that very few will remember, but we do remember. Shifting to left, right? So I remember Zimrite in the early days that sort of became left. We were involved here in a company called Glimpse, and that had early days of location intelligence, and Zimrite was using that uh, very well. But left had this in just looking at it from the outside. Lyft had this. Uh, I almost say a culture of uh, being in cooperation with the community. I think that came from Zimrite. I'm not so sure. But Uber was this, we're going to take the world and the world's against us. It may have come
Yeah.
from the founders, but Lyft didn't have that. They had that pink, mustache, and all that came later. But Lyft never said, I'm going to take everybody down. And
Mhm.
Uber said they did, and they were unabashed about the whole thing. Was that a topic of conversation inside? Was it a conscious, or is this something the founders culturally permeated through the company?
Um, I think it's hard not to reflect your personality
Mm-hmm.
into a company. And the
Mm-hmm.
personality of the founders of Lyft were very different than the
Mm-hmm.
personality of the founders of Uber, and their mission and the way
Mm-hmm.
they view the world was different. However,
Mm-hmm.
I would acknowledge that part of what Uber did
Mm-hmm.
was to have that kind of fighting mentality to
Mm-hmm.
overcome some really difficult forces around
Mm-hmm.
the taxi industry.
Commissions. Mm-hmm.
And so that was probably necessary at a
Mm-hmm.
time to break
Mm-hmm.
through.
Mm-hmm.
But then once that is broken through and the network, whether it's Uber or Lyft, continue to grow, now you are a fabric in the city where you have to be in harmony more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Travis had a challenge pivoting to that as a
Mm-hmm.
leader.
Mm-hmm.
and it was necessary. And then Dara was able to come in and make that pivot. Nicer, gentler Uber. We were able to come in and stay authentic to the founders' concept of cooperation and working together and working closely, which benefited us as well coming in. But the industry needed that. There's a time and a place to fight. The question is then how do you evolve over time so that you can grow and maintain?
True. Yeah, I mean, they had the world domination, eliminate taxis approach, while
Yeah.
there was going to be a coexistence. Seems like it was obvious from everybody. But so Lyft, Uber was running away, had this big ambitions. How did Lyft? What was Lyft's strategy at that point to say we're going to be a number two or survive? Because Uber was raising maybe more money and going after this with big ambitions, and they were going to take on the world, and they were going to fly planes, and all kinds of things. Seemed like Lyft was very true to its original mission. What was then the thinking that Lyft can do this and be okay doing it and make it?
Yeah. So, that's a discussion that we had when we first invested, and
Mm-hmm.
I was on the board. And then later I came and joined as full-time chief strategy officer for 4.5 years. So that was then what I lived and breathed. I would say initially it wasn't a feeling like we were number two. It was like we're gonna fight to be number one. However, we knew that the market was big enough for two players. The number of rides potential in a city is massive. And also, it wasn't this like scarce supply. There are lots of potential drivers, and drivers are comfortable driving for both. And because we didn't want to have an employee model, you have to allow them. You can't restrict them from driving to both, and that's what they ended up doing. So we felt that the market was big enough to support even a strong number two. But of course, our planning was how can we be number one? But there are points of market share that it gets more expensive to fight, and so you have to be careful about when you do that and when you don't. Then in terms of scope, when I joined, and even prior to that, like the mantra has been to focus. And there's a large enough opportunity in rides, and we can be really good at it. And then there were some adjacencies that were important. So like the future is self-driving, we need to address that. And so that was what I worked on, as well as the future is electrification. So how can we help drivers go that direction as well? The future is shared rides to reduce congestion. So we launched shared rides as well, where people are sharing. So there was enough innovation and there's enough market size to be really focused on what we were doing, which isn't always the case in other industries.
Let's take this driver aspect, because that was a key aspect of bringing the drivers and passengers together. Passengers were always there. They were using taxis before. You eliminated friction of payment. They started using Uber and Lyft. So, but the drivers, at some point, Uber thought drivers was their sort of, I wouldn't call them enemy, but it was a very contentious relationship that they led to autonomous. They went down this autonomous path, and so did you. What was the initial thinking behind autonomous cars? Because even now, even though it's launched in San Francisco, I think there's protests from all kinds of agencies and others about Cruise and Waymo and all that. What was the initial thinking that people will be very comfortable getting into driverless cars, or was it that driver-assisted cars could be the transition in the original, without getting into the technology part of it, just the key aspect of how you attract a passenger to sit in the car?
Well, I think it wasn't really about driver assisted. Like that doesn't really do anything to help the economics. It was something that was happening in the industry, and we believe that it's safer. That's there, but really the belief was that the experience is is for consumers in a driverless vehicle. There's a lot of benefits there that
Mm-hmm.
can be. One is um, some people are worried about the safety with a driver, and so
Mm-hmm.
now it's just you. You
Mm-hmm.
have that. You don't have to worry about that other person that's there in doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Two is that it should be safer than a human by an order of
Mm-hmm.
magnitude, and that's what our
Mm-hmm.
design goal was. So
Mm-hmm.
they're still rolling out right now today, Waymo, Cruise, et cetera, in San Francisco,
Mm-hmm.
and yes, there will be instances where the system is not perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and but it should be far less than
Mm-hmm.
what a human faces in terms of the miles per between accidents, as an example. The challenge with that, which I think we underestimated, was that you can get a lot of media coverage if a self-driving car blocks something,
Mm-hmm.
and versus a human does that all the time, but
Yeah,
you're not going
yeah,
to get the same
yeah,
level of coverage. And so
yeah.
statistically we were right, but there's a perception challenge that I think is probably larger than what we thought when these vehicles were launching.
So, given that you were in the I mean, almost one of the early entrants in the autonomous, so where do you think it is, and what do you foresee for the next 3 to 5 years in autonomous driving, in terms
Well,
of
there's a couple
technology
things.
or
There's
experience?
yeah, there's technology, cost, and experience. I think experience
Mm-hmm.
is fine.
Mm-hmm.
There is a education on how
Mm-hmm.
safe it is for a consumer that
Mm-hmm.
needs to happen. That's the most important thing around the experience. But once you're
Mm-hmm.
in the vehicle, feels great, but it is a little bit jarring of like, whoa, there's
Mm-hmm.
no one in the front seat driving. So that is a big change. Um, Cost, vehicles are still not uh, they're not yeah, they're basically too expensive
Mm-hmm.
on a cost per mile basis when you account for the lifetime of vehicle, the change out of the sensors, the compute power that's necessary. But that cost is coming down over time. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm confident, but we're not there yet. The other
Mm-hmm.
piece that is the reality is that the reason why we're able to now operate these safely in cities is that they do have a human takeover. So that
Mm-hmm.
if the vehicle is not sure about what to do, a human will be called in to help make a decision. So it's human assisted. And
Mm-hmm.
that increases the cost per mile too, depending on how
Mm-hmm.
often a human is being involved.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to have one human that's watching the entire ride, or can you be watching four rides at the same time in
Mm-hmm.
doing that? So I think that's going to take some time where
Mm-hmm.
the system gets more intelligent and it does gather data and learn. And the
Mm-hmm.
long tail of events is what matter there because it
Mm-hmm.
can do the basics already. It's the
Mm-hmm.
long tail that makes a big difference. So I'd say that we are probably a few years from economic viability,
Mm-hmm.
but from a technical viability, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
It took a
Mm-hmm.
while, but it's there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Highways is a little bit more challenging because you're going at high
Mm-hmm.
speeds and you
Mm-hmm.
can't afford to have a mistake. You can make more
Mm-hmm.
mistakes when you're going 30 miles an hour than when you're going 70 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That'll take some more
But
time.
got it. So now, just to Toyota bought it. Just the last question on that topic. Toyota acquired you guys, that unit rather,
Yeah.
and in your mind, do you see the OEMs changing the experience? I mean, still it's a car. The way you drive a car, I drive a car. Could it be that it doesn't, in theory, it doesn't need a steering, or it doesn't need the same space constraint as as the current car is, front and
Yes.
back, or right? We could all be sitting and just having this podcast in a vehicle, in a pod that moves, and there may be use cases outside of just transportation for those. But is that something that OEMs will experiment?
Yes, I think down the line because we're not there yet. I think you need to get vehicles as they're designed today at a cost working to where they are.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some beautiful designs and there's a lot of ideas. And I used to give a presentation on this in the future of transportation where
Mm-hmm.
um, there's no reason to have a steering wheel or anything, so you can have more cabin space. You can
Mm-hmm.
fit more passengers in. You can do more in there. You can use, is it while you're sleeping, you're working, you're being entertained, you're socializing, and you go beyond just transportation into why can't your office be mobile?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't your office be moving to wherever you need to go? Why can't your
Mm-hmm.
house be mobile? Um, I'm running a venture fund now called Climactic, which invests in climate tech. And what we're doing is electrification of transportation. And we invested in a company called Lightship, and they've created
Mm-hmm.
an all-electric RV, and it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, you would love to live in it. And you can imagine someday if that is autonomous, where your home is mobile.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to, while you're sleeping at night, you're going to your next destination, kind of like you're going in a plane.
Oh, awesome. That's a good segue to your new fund, that your most current venture. What's what's the focus? Climate tech is the focus, but what's the area you're doing it in? Because these seems to be fairly long. Can you elaborate for our audience about the fund and what are you guys looking at in investing, or what have you invested in?
Yeah. So first of all, um, for me at this point, after having invested in some climate related opportunities in transportation and also spending time at Lyft, um, I saw both an opportunity for impact as well as returns as we went from clean tech, which was about disrupting the energy space, to climate tech, which was about decarbonizing every industry. Venture makes money on huge disruption, and digitization was one of those.
Yep.
And a lot of your careers are successful based on digitization. Decarbonization is the next big wave.
Yep.
And everything needs to be decarbonized. We need to do it for our planet. Some people say 2040, some say 2050, but it needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have enough technology to get us there. BCG
Mm-hmm.
of going to a net zero planet is there with today's technology, and that has to be moving at a much faster pace. Like
Mm-hmm.
wind and solar is cost effective, but it's just not being deployed fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
And we need large scale storage
Mm-hmm.
of energy to make that work. So we're going in looking at all of the different ways that you can help get to a net zero planet. And what we're focused on is businesses. So if you look at the consumer, I don't believe the consumer should be asked to or is going to reduce their energy footprint, especially in the developing world, as
Mm-hmm.
they're just coming online. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think the consumer is going to pay a premium for green
Mm-hmm.
products. So
Mm-hmm.
really, and I don't think that the government is effective enough to legislate our way to success either. It's not going to
Mm-hmm.
happen. So
Mm-hmm.
we're really relying on businesses. 8,000 plus businesses have made a net zero pledge in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's 90% of worldwide GDP is under pledge.
Mm-hmm.
They need help in getting there. Our
Mm-hmm.
fund is focused around not as much deep tech, more around software, data, and services to
Mm-hmm.
help enterprises and mobility get there. So we do seed level investing at the early stage, partner very closely with founders, and
Mm-hmm.
help them sell to the enterprise or provide a mobility solution that helps get to net zero.
Awesome, Raj. I could go on. I mean, your stories are so fascinating. We could go on in any one of your versions for a long time. But thank you for your time. It was a
Thank you.
fantastic podcast, and thanks for taking the time. And for our audience, ego dissolution. That's the word of the day. So please subscribe wherever you listen to our podcast, and give us a great review. And thanks a lot, Raj. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very
Take
much,
care.
Raj.
Thank you for listening to our podcast from Startup to Exit, brought to you by TIE Seattle. Assisting in production today are Eesha, Jain, and Minee Verma. Please subscribe to our podcast and rate our podcast wherever you listen to them. Hope you enjoyed it.